about 1 o'clock, and welcome, Clark. I'm
Well,
happy to have you here with us, and for a We Talk Art. Um, Clark, I don't know if you remember, but I met you probably, oh gosh, probably 12, 13 years ago at the Northwest Pastel Society.
okay. When
You
I
came up and judged the open show for us in
yeah,
Gig Harbor and did a
a
workshop, I believe.
a great show and a great
Anyway,
group
it
of,
was a good workshop, and all that. It was a fun little place to be, wasn't it?
yes, it was.
So anyway, let's start out with you were born in Colorado, right?
I was.
And lived
How-
there in your early. Yeah, tell us about how your early life was, and what kind of got you started. I know in your bio it said something about you've had your dad gave you some old German pastels that he had,
well,
and
I
so
actually
I'll let you take it away and give you.
here's the box, and on the inside,
Oh
the
wow.
label. And this was before World War II that my father got these and sent them
Wow.
home to Denver, and then gave them to me as a teenager. I never did
Wonderful.
what he was doing with a box of pastels. Some of them were broken, as of course they should be if they're used. So
Right.
he
Right.
used, I was so excited to have them, I think, and off painting with them right away. So I never did ask why.
So
I,
was your father an artist?
he made furniture. He did some mosaic work. He was a businessman. I think he did artwork and creative projects just to relax.
Nice.
And I grew up in the country outside of Denver, and the landscape was my best friend from a little boy. Both my parents were avid gardeners, so I think that I really tuned into the landscape at a very early age, and I haven't left yet. It's still my main subject. I do some still lives, but typically landscapes.
And so you at an early age, I mean, so I bet you were one of those kids that would be out there laying in the grass, looking up at the clouds, figuring out what those cloud shapes
How
were.
did you?
And
Absolutely.
because I grew up in the country, and that was my deal. Looking at the colors,
A
looking
hammock.
at colors and shapes and so on.
I would look up from the
Yeah.
hammock at the leaves against the sky and think about the colors and when the sun hit those leaves and when they were in shadow. And so, yes, we have that in common.
Yes. And so then you went to art school in Colorado initially, right?
I did. Even in elementary school.
Can you hear me, Clark?
I can hear you great. Yeah. Can you? I'm coming through clear.
Okay.
Yes. Good. Yeah. Even
there was some little.
Sorry. Should I go
You're
ahead?
breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Please.
In elementary school, I even got junior awards for art. So I think I was getting praise right from the start, and that, for a kid, and I was a pretty shy kid. If you start getting praise for something, it's like, okay, this might be a direction I want to continue in. And high school, I remember being introduced to watercolors, oil paints. With one of the awards, I got a set of oil paints, and it wasn't. I don't know why my dad waited. Maybe it was smart that he did before he gave me the set of pastels. But I kind of played around with all of those until maybe college level. And then, of course, got a bachelor's in art in college, in fine art. So took every art course I could and again, introduced to printmaking, all kinds of things, but I just kept coming back to pastels and oils. And my first workshop was with Albert. I imagine there are a lot of people listening and a lot of pastellists worldwide whose the first workshop was with Albert Andel. He was very inspirational, still is. And I'm still taking workshops, but no longer in pastels. Typically, I'll take them in maybe with an oil painter. But I took a gouache workshop not too long ago. I took an abstract workshop last year. Still feel there's plenty to learn.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think that, it's not, I mean, people will say, well, you don't need to take a workshop, you're there. Well, but are you really? I mean, I think it's an ever learning thing, don't you?
Absolutely. I think if I felt I was there, I would start doing the same painting over and over again. And I love that my work is still evolving. It's very exciting to see and kind of experiment.
And don't you think that, yes, excuse me, don't you think that that's partly because you're exploring different mediums and things? I mean, it's like, it just opens your eyes to whole different elements, really.
Absolutely.
And ways to look at things.
Yeah. And
so you went to,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
yeah, you finished what you were saying. I'm sorry. There's a little delay in the audio.
Okay, so you don't know if I'm finished or not. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Seeing artists working in different mediums as well inspires me to go in different directions and to add to what I know about pastels. I think other than still life, typically the workshops I take are landscape workshops. So, there's still plenty to learn, whatever medium I'm using.
And so you graduated from was it Colorado College?
Yes.
And then you went to the Art Academy of Art in San Francisco?
Academy of Art, yeah.
You went to the Academy of Art.
Yeah, which at the time was geared towards fine arts more than it is now. Now it's much more geared towards graphic arts and careers in graphic arts than it was back then. I remember taking lithography classes, airbrush classes. I've kind of forgotten about a lot of them because it's been so long. And
yeah.
Practice now.
So I just see Doug Wagner popped up with a question about let's see, your studio, I believe. He said, Clark, will you mention the construction of your studio?
Oh, I'm happy to. It's a straw bale. Three of the main walls are straw bale, and that means they actually are stacked straw bales. In California, because of earthquake restrictions, there has to be a superstructure. So the roof beam is held up by typical posted beam, but a majority of the construction is straw bale with stucco on the outside and hand plaster on the inside. And then I think you can see behind me is it looks like a grid, and what it is stock fencing for cattle or pigs.
Oh.
And 13 feet long, and I'd say it's 5 feet tall, and I can just clip drawing boards to it. So I take my pastels down on the drawing boards and then use clothespins. And I can have 8, 10, 12 paintings going at one time. Often when I've been painting outdoors, I'll bring those paintings in and put them up up above so that I can keep looking at them. And then when it's obvious what needs done, I can pop them down to the lower level where I stand and work and get going. I find that by having so many different paintings going at one time, I never get stuck. And I don't have the camera on the other part of my studio, which is where I do oil paintings. So I'm never bored.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that way, well, first of all, that's an ingenious way to use fencing. I mean, that's great. I mean, and
Yeah,
so much more practical and than some of the things you buy ready made for showing work or whatever. But
yeah.
that's a super great idea.
The
That's
oil
a
painting.
that's a the best takeaway of the day.
Well, good. My oil paintings are on standard easels, typical easels, because I'm only working on one of those at a
Sure.
time, maybe three going um, in other easels. But also the working wall, the fencing leans forward a little bit. So the excess pastel dust falls off and down to the floor. I see so many of my students working, well, especially on tabletop easels that lean really back. And we all know if you're working on sanded paper, all that excess pastel just piles up loose on the rough texture of the paper. So I was glad to think about it before I even started to have the fencing, the working wall lean forward. And I always do work standing up.
Yes. Yeah, because you just get too big of a mess if you try to work flat with pastels.
Yeah, definitely.
So over time, you've garnered some some great awards. So you're a master pastelist with PSA, right? And a distinguished pastelist with the PSWC. And then you're also a signature member of the Laguna Plein Air Painters.
Yes.
And maybe that's you even garnered more awards and titles.
Well, one of the ones I'm most proud of is the IAPS Master Circle, which I got the end of last year after the convention. So I'm itching to get to next year's convention so I can get up on the stage and finally get, I thought I would never ever get a Master Circle, because I think IAPS shows are the hardest to get into. And I don't know about any of you, but I got the rejection letter last week for the most recent show, and very happy for all the people who got in, but gosh, isn't it my turn again? No. So.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good point, Clark. I think that I'm not sure how you feel about this, but it's so great when you get into a show. And of course, then if you win an award, that's even a bigger deal. But the rejection letters come to everybody.
Yes.
Everybody gets them. I mean, somebody in at your level gets a rejection letter, and it humbles people.
Absolutely.
And and of course, I like to say too, it's like, it's an opinion. It's so I think it's you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt when you get a rejection, but you can also look and when I get a rejection, I go through and I look and see what got in and do some critical comparing. I mean, don't you do that?
Yes. Yeah, I haven't looked at this IAP show yet. I thought I'd wait until after this interview. Because as you said, it's very humbling. It makes you think about, yes, okay, what can I do? What would make this a better painting?
Right. So obviously you do plein air work, and how do you feel that fits in with your studio work, and what impact does that have for your studio work, or whatever you're working on, whether it's plein air for a competition where obviously you're going to get it all done at one time and then move on, or whether you're doing plein air for studies for studio work. Well, what's your take on the importance of doing plein air work?
I think it's absolutely essential for, certainly for my work, because landscapes, there's only so much you can see in a photo, and even digital cameras are so much better than the slide cameras I used to, the single lens reflex cameras that I used taking slides for decades, it seems like. The camera can only see so much in terms of light and dark, and it's going to see one better than the other typically, depending on how you have your camera set. And out on location, you can see into the shadows. You can see so many more colors. It's really taught me that just because it's a green landscape doesn't mean it's all green. I can see so much more in terms of, say, warm colors hidden in the greens. And so I typically start my underpaintings for any kind of shrubbery, trees, hillsides that are green with warm colors, and typically stay away from greens as far as I can into a painting. Of course, at a certain point, you have to put the greens in or it's not going to make sense because everything else has to harmonize with what you use. But I take every chance I can to go out and paint on location. And if we have time, I can show you some of the paintings I've done on location recently. I did one yesterday, and also a number that I did in New Mexico, Arizona, over the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think those studies that you do out in the field are so valuable, and I'm glad to hear you say that. When you do your underpainting, what's your process for underpaintings? What's your medium?
Let me just quickly walk through. This is a thumbnail for two thumbnails for Arizona paintings of Monument Valley that I'm working on right now. I've just started. Typically, they're very quick. There's nothing I would want to show to anyone to say this is what my artwork is. But I think you can see I do marks at half and thirds. And then when I go to a larger sheet of paper, don't know where it went. I do the same thing. Here, I'll grab it. You can see half here and thirds here, and I do it on all four sides. And this is exactly the same proportions as the sketch that I show, one of the sketches that I just showed you. And I use a pastel pencil to sketch the outline of the objects. I'm kind of, I think I took that lesson to heart in elementary school. Draw in the outline, stay in the outlines, don't go over the edge. So that's kind of the way I start. And I'll do a layer of pastel and dip my brush into alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Depending if it's water soluble like Lacarte, it's got to be 91% rubbing alcohol. I don't know if people want me to get this technical, but anyway, I use rubbing alcohol.
Yeah.
And
I think get as technical as you want, Clark.
Okay.
I think people are interested.
The alcohol sets that, like, a brush, I clean my brush in between each color and brush alcohol onto each color separately, and that evaporates off very quickly. And then as I was saying, typically I'll have a contrasting color in the underpainting compared to what the final color is going to be. So warm colors under most greens. Often underpaintings with absolutely no green in them whatsoever. And once that's dry, I can layer as many, depending on what paper I use, as many layers as possible. Going from big and broad, the same way as I do with my oil paintings, big and broad strokes, to finer and finer detail work and tipping the pastel up more. I consider it painting early on, where I'm using the side of the chunk of pastel and doing broad strokes, and can consider it drawing much more when I get near the end and tip those chunks of pastel up and do the fine detail work around the outside edges. I don't know, do you want me to talk about what papers are my favorites right now?
Sure, absolutely. I think
Okay.
anything that you can share with the group is wonderful. That was one of my questions.
Okay, yeah, it seems the appropriate time. UArt is one of my favorites. I love it because they have 8 different grits to choose from, sort of a buff color. And you know, these companies keep putting out new products. So UArt might have another color tone paper, but as far as last I know, they just have this buff color. And I prefer 600. I know a lot of artists use 300 or 400 grit, but I like, I think this is finer than 300 or 400. I'm sure somebody could answer that question. I've recently gotten a lot of 400 too to compare.
Right. That is correct.
I love Art Spectrum. It's a pebblier surface, not as velvety smooth as UArt. And it comes in a wide variety of colors, made in Australia. I just love, and you can typically buy it in warm packs and cool packs. So you get a set of, say, 2 of each color. Another paper is Canson Touch. And I use this quite often also. Again, more of a pebbly surface. And again, a wonderful array of colors for the tone the paper. So that even if I'm going to do an underpainting where I'm choosing a variety of colors that aren't necessarily going to be in the finished painting, I get to start with a cohesive tone that sort of ties the whole painting together. And that's why I like working on the tone papers. Sometimes I use Pastel Premier, a bit more aggressively toothy. I do like toothy paper. And I'm sure anyone who was pasteling in the last 15 to 20 years knows Wallace paper. I only have leftovers from Kitty Wallace's paper. But it was great. You know, the very first paper I used that was, I don't even believe it was archival, but it was Ersta, the German sanded pastel paper. And I think Albert Handel taught his students to work on that way back. Let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to think what year I don't really remember what year I first worked with Albert. I've just gotten a pack of Lux Archival. Haven't tried it yet. Pastel Matte I've used, and I'm absolutely, it feels as if there's no tooth at all to it, really. And it's amazing how many layers you can add to really make within your painting. But really the 3 that I use the most are UArt, Canson Touch, and Art Spectrum. And who knows, maybe in the future I will use Lux Archival. I think that's, I see a lot of posts online with Jacob Aguilar. And I think he uses Lux Archival a lot, and with fabulous results.
You know, that's a beautiful paper. It doesn't, what I like about it, it doesn't curl like the UArt does.
Yes,
because
it does.
I think it's on a cotton rag paper base, maybe.
I might
but
find
it's beautiful, but it's pure white. You know, it's pure white.
That's one thing.
Have you ever used, Clark, have you ever used the dark UArt?
I have used the dark,
almost like charcoal gray, almost black.
For a year or so, I exclusively used black pastel paper, and I think it was Art Spectrum, and really loved the results. And you know, everyone will say it makes your colors pop, and it really does. but I got away from that.
Yes.
Although I'd have to say I do pretty much avoid white papers. That's one of the reasons why I started doing underpaintings. I also took a workshop with Kitty Wallace back when, and she was using, recommending underpaintings too. So it's kind of habitual for me. The one thing when I'm painting on location is if it's very humid out, I have to decide if it's going to tie up too much time to do an underpainting, because anyone who paints often outdoors realizes the window is pretty short to get down what you need before the lights changed or that storm has come in or whatever. Typically, I like to on location. I like to be done in an hour and a half. Occasionally 2 hours, if I have that luxury.
Yes. It's a narrow window, isn't it, to be out there?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So somebody said, do you ever use acrylics as an underpainting?
I do not. I find pastel. And I know Richard McKinley often uses watercolor, or in the past has, as well as Albert likewise has done so. And I just find then I'm carrying a whole other set of materials with me. So if I can just take a little can of alcohol with me and brushes, that's plenty of extra. I carry so much with me when I paint out on location. My oil painting friends with their little pochade boxes and limited palette set of paints, and I'm carrying their big box of pastels and a backpack with 3 or 4 sheets of paper on drawing board. They all laugh, but it's okay. I'm happy with what I come up with.
That's good. Well, I think it's, you pare it down to what you need.
Yeah.
What you got, what you need to have to make your work, your working area comfortable and getting done what you want. But yeah, the simplification is always great, I think. Yeah. So Clark, let's walk through some of your paintings and tell folks how your thought process as you go through those, and I think that'd be really informative and helpful for people at any level.
Okay, I've got some framed paintings. Well, I wonder which I should start with. Let me start with, let's see if this is even going to fit. Yes.
Yep.
This is a painting that I did in Albuquerque last year at the IAPS convention. I can turn another light on, but then it tends to make the white blast out. So if you can see this well enough, I can get a little closer for a little more detail. This is a painting I did, obviously, near sunset, those wonderful storms that come in and out in New Mexico throughout the afternoon and evening. I was attracted, of course, to the warm light in along the horizon and the low hanging clouds. And then the simple patterning of the pinon trees on the hillside, the rolling hillsides, before one got down to the lights of the city down below. The reason I picked this first to talk about, well, let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything more I want to say about this. I can put it back up, but there's a little brag, but I thought I'd better do it now or I'll forget. The most recent issue of the Pastel Journal has an article that I wrote on my plein air road trips, several that I took last year. And let's see, well, this is the cover of the plein air road trip. And this is the painting that I just held up. And there are a number of other paintings. I don't see that there's much reflection coming off of that. So, um,
That's a beautiful, beautiful painting.
well, thank you. And I'm very honored to have had an article in the magazine. So you were asking about my process. This one, obviously, because it is a twilight painting, I had to work really fast on this, and probably did more in the studio to finish it up than I typically do on my plein air work. Of course, I would have used very light, bright colors for the sunshine area, the little strip. The rest I found on location, or when I came home and was working in my studio to finish this up, I kept having to darken the foreground, and I'm not used to doing that. But to make the sky really sing, I had to darken and darken and darken across here. But as anyone who has worked in oil paintings, and it's of course the same in pastels too, you don't want to go too dense or too black in your darks, or they just die. So it was a challenge to, I had this tree up in the foreground to give scale to what was beyond, and also to be the darkest dark. And I think when I started that, it was dark browns. And then I used some purples and dark blues on top of it. And a little bit of green around the edges. So I guess
Yeah, that's a beautiful painting.
well, thank you. I have done a lot of paintings in Palm Springs. I work from photos sometimes when I get back home, but in the studio, on location, I love painting down there because the colors are so different. I live in Sonoma County, Northern California, rolling hills, typical seasons for coastal California, where we get green winters and dry summers, but nothing like down in the desert. And my best friend's birthday is in July, and I always make a trip down there just to sort of scald myself and to do paintings. But this one, 3 days in a row, I was up before sunrise and out on location. And those of you who've ever painted with me know that's very unusual for me to be up before sunrise. I like evening painting a lot more than I do early morning paintings. But this was the very first light hitting the hills, mountains up above. And something like this, I really, as I said before, I'm really flying to get it completed, get enough information down so that I can go back to the studio and finish it, or hopefully finish there. And this was a wonderful trip, time of year when the full moon was setting to the west and the sun was coming up in the east. And
yeah, that's gorgeous. The wonderful light.
Thank you. This is another early morning painting from the desert. And I just love the cliffs and the stark. This is much clearer. I was just down there a few days ago, and a lot of windstorms, so very hazy skies. But this was early this summer. And I love the contrast of sunshine and shadow. And I really get in that patterning right from the start, because that really, to me, is what's the exciting part. And then, of course, the shadows get lighter as they go back each layer, and then even lighter farther back. And that's what I love about pastels. When I'm doing oils, it just takes me longer. Really, I think the challenge for me in oils is mixing colors, because we have the luxury in pastels, if you have a big enough box, to have pretty much all your colors out in front of you. And, I use a Heilmann box, the medium sized, I can't tell you the actual inches, but yeah, I use a Heilmann box and find that I can get enough chunks in that to satisfy pretty much any plein air location I go to. And let's see, one more quick one. This I did yesterday, hour and a half before the storm sort of set in. This is a Sonoma County scene. Fall color is starting in the trees, vineyard up above. I can get a little closer, a little more detail. This one likewise, I had to keep darkening. There's a road in the foreground that's coming across, and I kept having to darken that. And there are also, let's see here, dry grasses coming through here. And in order to get a nice silhouette of the eucalyptus trees and redwoods up against the light sky below the storm clouds, I had to keep darkening both the road here, the vineyard here, and the hill, excuse me, the grassy slopes in through there, so that I would get a nice contrast up above. My eye was tending to go too many different places because, you know, I have high contrast here with a fall color, had high contrast here, and of course, between the sky and the silhouette of all the foliage up above.
Clark, talk to us about that one that's directly behind you of the, you know, the mesas. That's got some great color and contrast.
Okay.
Yes.
This is maybe a third done. It's kind of in that scrappy phase, the unruly teenage phase, where I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. This is, I took a trip early this year. I took a workshop in southern Utah with Calvin Liang, who was a Southern California oil painter. And he said it was fine if I painted in pastels. So I did, let's see, 2 paintings a day for 3 days during the workshop. And then I've just looked over and over through all the digital photos that I took. And I'm just so in love with Monument Valley, but it's so vast and so different than any place I've ever painted before that I've avoided doing any work from it. So this and the one I showed you where it was just pastel pencil outlines are the first 2 that I've done in pastels from Monument Valley. And this one, at this stage, I've gone overboard with the colors, and I often do that. And underpainting, I'll get vibrant, very rich color, and then tone them down so that the painting isn't just sort of knock you over the head color, and really shows distance. Obviously, darker shadows, richer, warmer colors for the cliffs up front. Middle ground cliffs back here, cooler warms, and paler darks, shadows, and then way back, much cooler blues. I had to make sure the contrast of the sky behind it was enough to really show off the silhouette of both of these. And just starting to work with all kinds of sagebrush up front, and that red soil. So it's a wonderful contrast between the turquoises and the sort of brick color here, and then the sunshine strip going back through, which in the underpainting was pale yellow, just to make sure it was really bright and would show up. And now I'm taking some blue greens over it to knock it down, but not covering it. That's one thing. If I'm going to take the time to do an underpainting, I don't want to use a heavy stroke and absolutely cover over whatever those contrasting colors are, because I want them popping through. And that's one of the reasons I love rough sanded papers, because they allow, the texture allows for all sorts of color to pop through unless I blend. And let's see. Yeah, so far, the only blending I've done is up in the clouds a little bit. And typically that's where the skies are the one area where I'm pretty consistent in terms of blending. I don't particularly want a lot of texture up in my skies. I want it in the foreground, especially, and less texture as I go farther back.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So Clark, tell me, how are you mounting that on your backer board? Is that
Just
do you glue it on, or
just loops of masking tape.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Loops, just
Oh,
a
okay.
loop of masking tape. You know, something
Yeah,
I
okay.
learned in kindergarten. And so many people ask me when I do demos, how do you get your paper to stay up on that board? And you know, it doesn't always. Sometimes the paper I'm using is heavy enough that I come into the studio in the morning and a pastel is face down on the floor, but not too often. Someone just asked a question, do you
There's
want
always
me to?
those little wrecks.
Yeah. And I don't know if you, is this a good time?
If you
Do you want me to show a few framed paintings?
Sure, show a couple
Okay.
of those, and then I got a couple of questions that we'll go
Okay.
into.
I'm going to turn the camera. Maybe I'll see if I can pull the table a little closer. This is that. Can you see that well enough?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I could turn a spotlight on this, but then there might be some reflections off the glass. This is the painting
Sure.
that got me the Master Circle designation last year. So of course I'm very proud of it. It's a plein air painting that I did on location at Montaña de Oro State Park in Southern California. And I was painting with Jim Tyler, who got a PSW, I think he got Best of Show at one of the PSWC shows last year.
Yep.
And after the reception, we both went out painting, and it was one of those perfect days at the coast where there was no wind, and there were people, little tiny dots of people in my painting down on the coast. What I liked most about this, what really caught my eye, first of all, I had a sheet of paper this long that had been sitting on drawing board in my backpack for weeks and weeks, and I finally thought, this is the place where I can do that painting or use that piece of paper. So I did, follow the same process I did, briefly talked about. But what I really liked was the sunshine bouncing off the backside of this cliff and lighting up the inside of that part of the continuing coast. A challenge for me was to really leave these trees up above, just suggested. My temptation is get detailed, and I'm learning, specifically watching so many of the fabulous plein air oil painters and how they really soft focus anything that's not the focal point. And I'm learning, finding that I don't have to have detail everywhere, that I can leave something like this just suggested, it's silhouette, you know right away that it's windswept trees against the coast. You said one or two or three, so
Yep.
Oh, this is, okay, I'll do three. This is a painting I did. Any of you who've been to San Francisco maybe have taken a day trip to Sausalito. It's a small town, coastal town. just across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I was part of a plein air event last month where 10 artists painted 2 days and then popped things into the frame and had an exhibition and in hopefully sale. I think everyone did pretty well in terms of sales. And this is a fountain. And my choice demanded that I be someplace where there wouldn't be a line of tourists behind me, watching me and asking questions. So I was right up against a palm tree and kind of hidden my agapanthus up foreground. I really wanted to paint the fountain. And I had done some sketches of it beforehand, but this was a competition, so I couldn't do a painting ahead of time. But I had done some sketches to get some idea for composition, and really liked zeroing in on. It's a Victorian fountain in a square in the town, a little parklet, and stucco building in the background. I might even go in and darken some of this, the background, the pine tree and the building, so that the sunshine on the water pops even more. But I was very happy with this painting, especially for doing it in a couple hours and having a few people find me hidden in the garden and ask questions. And here is a painting some of you might recognize, not as my own.
So Clark, somebody is asking a question. Do you do your own frame?
I do not. Some of the paintings I help my framer make decisions on. A lot of them for the plein air events, I have to have my frames prepared beforehand. So I have to have backing glass, everything ready, and my paper cut before I even know what I'm going to paint to go into that frame. And those I'll often get through Randy Higbee, King of Frame in Costa Mesa, Southern California, who does a huge array of plein air frames, and both ready-made and custom.
Right. This
is one of his. This, I was so, I entered this in a show. Over a number of years, 4 or 5 years, I took pack trips with a group of artists up to the Eastern Sierras. And one of the other artists, one of the years when I went was Kim Lloydier, fabulous pastelist. And I entered this in a show that was a retrospective of all the trips that people took. And this one wasn't accepted, and I was crushed. It was my absolute favorite painting that I had submitted, and got to the show, and Kim had the exact same scene, but a horizontal, same time of day, and we both must have stood there taking photos of this scene where the late light is hitting the mountainside across the way, and you get this great dark band of the trees and the reflections in the water. And I was so amazed. I had sent her my image and hers from the show because, you know, I'm sure this happens a lot where two artists will see the same scene and each interpretation is quite different, but it was exactly the same scene. So, okay, do you have some more questions, Bonnie? I'm amazed at how fast time is going.
Yes, I do.
Okay,
yes.
Then I'll stop.
Someone asked, what your favorite pastels are for plein air?
You know, I use them all. There are certain blue grays in Holbein that I can't find in any other brand. Some of the greens that, oh boy. Well, Terry Ludwig has some fabulous darks. Unison has some great greens. I love Giraud pastels because their texture works both as a soft pastel and as a harder pastel. The Rembrandt is the brand that I use since I was a kid. because they've been around the longest of any of these brand. Well, obviously Schmincke, the box my dad gave me, is still around. But in terms of sort of the workhorse, I would say Rembrandt are the ones I can find most often open stock. Yeah, I just break chunks of them all. And we'll start with harder pastels when my tooth is really rough, and go to softer pastels as I get closer to the finished painting.
Yes. So Clark, if you have some advice for, new pastelists, people that are just getting started in the medium, what would you give them as far as, like supplies, classes, just any general advice that, might make their transition to the pastel world a little easier?
Yeah, well, supplies, I always tell students to support their local art supply stores whenever possible. The one problem can be that small art supply stores can't carry open stock of several different brands of pastels, meaning you can't buy just one stick, you have to buy a set. And they also can't carry more than, say, two or three pastel papers. I am in love with sanded pastel papers, so I'd have to say the old Canson Mitient with a weave to it is, if you want to use liquid underpaintings, you can't use that paper. It's a good practice paper, but that's why I was thrilled when Canson Touch came out, because it's tough and durable and can take liquid. I would say, yeah, in terms of education, learn from as many people as you can. Pay attention to what the artist you're considering their workshop, what kind of work they put out, so that you're not. I was surprised when I took a workshop early on that was figure in the landscape, and I somehow missed that figure word in there and was hoping for a landscape workshop. It was a big challenge, a good one, of course, but yeah. So really read what people are, how they describe their workshops, and see if they're a good fit. And try a bunch of papers. I say local art supply stores. If you can't find what you're looking for, I can't speak highly enough for dakotapastels.com. They've got everything to do with the medium.
They do, and they have really helpful folks that work there.
Yes.
If you have questions, and I think a little pitch for them is, they will sell like sample packs of paper.
Yes.
I believe, and I think they also have sample packs of pastels too, don't they?
Yeah.
I believe.
And they rate.
So yes, they rate them by hardness.
Yes, that's very helpful too.
So if you have, I mean, I'm a big reader, and so of course I like to buy books and read art books. Do you have you have a great library, Clark?
I do,
and you have favorite ones that you recommend people to?
I can't speak highly enough for Edgar Payne's Composition of Outdoor Painting. It has examples of his paintings, not enough, of course, but examples of his paintings, examples of different kinds of compositions that he recommends trying. Just so great. I'm trying to think. Some of these aren't how-to. I think Stephen Quiller not Stephen Quiller, who gave a talk last month to PSWC.
Mitch Albala.
Mitchell Albala has a couple excellent books on composition, and the most recent one is on composition, if I'm not mistaken. And Richard Schmidt's Everything I Know About Painting, which is one of the most comprehensive books on painting that the full title is Alla Prima. Everything I Know About Painting, something like that. An incredible book, so packed with information. You know, I've started it 4 or 5 times, and I'm not sure I've ever gotten all the way through it because there's just so much to learn. In terms of artists that I admire, I recently saw this book advertised, George Carlson, The American West. And he's a sculptor, he is an oil painter, and he is also a pastelist. Absolutely phenomenal paintings in pastel, used a little bit differently, very, very little blending, a lot of strokes. I just think he's an incredible artist in so many different mediums. And I don't see his name popping up all that often. Trying to think any other books that Albert Pandel has come out with several wonderful books. One of the very first pastel books I got back in the 70s was one that he put out. So very inspirational.
I think there's some really great ones. You know, the Mitch Albala, the last one I think he published is it's like a workbook, so there's like lessons in it.
Yes.
You know, that you can do the lessons, and I think that's really helpful. You know, I think Dawn Emerson also did that with her kind of multimedia approach with pastels and inks and gesso and so on as well. But I think those are really great for people of any level to work in, and you learn as you do things like that.
Yeah. Another artist, I mentioned him, but I was trying to think of Mitchell Albala, but Stephen Quiller, who is a water media artist, but has
Yes.
put several books, and one's specifically on color. And I think it's probably the most comprehensive color book I've ever read.
Yes, he's a beautiful artist as well.
Yeah.
So Clark, Theodore Bush is on our Zoom meeting, and he said, I was visiting the Red Brown Collection Gallery in Bodego Bay this past week, and when I told Ren that that I was a new pastelist, he immediately said you were his favorite pastelist. So he's very happy to have met you today.
Oh, I'm touched.
Kudos.
You too.
That's great. Yeah, so any other little tips that you want to share with folks and this afternoon?
Well, let me think. I just saw a question pop up about, will I be giving any workshops? I'm pretty much now, I work one-on-one. I work privately with artists. And if an art organization wants to get together a group of artists and hire me to teach a workshop, I love to do that. But I no longer coordinate them myself. It wasn't the fun part of it for me. And I don't teach group lessons out of my studio anymore either, but happy to have people visit, and happy to work one-on-one with people. And if there are workshops scheduled, I will post them on my website. So tips: paint as much as you possibly can. And ideally have a space where you can leave your paintings out. If you have to put your materials away, at least leave a painting out that you're working on, so that you're inspired to get back to it, and so that you can see things that pop up that need changing, or that you can see, wow, I did a great job on that. Stand back from your work as much as possible. I have a mirror, a big mirror across my studio, and I also have a little hand mirror. So hand mirror, I can be close up to small paintings and look over my shoulder. The big mirror is across the studio, and all I have to do is turn around and I see my work backwards and see it at a distance. And that makes a huge difference to point out problems, or once again, things that are really working.
Those are great tips. And I think touch a little bit on critique too. Self-critique, and then having someone that you trust that can give you good, honest critique. I mean, touch on that a little bit, Clark, if you would.
I think that group critiques are excellent in that you get viewpoints from a lot of different people, and you aren't sort of crushed by that person's negative comments or suggestions that you didn't really want to do or didn't want to hear. I love participating in group critiques because it teaches me, looking at other people's work, because it teaches me what to look for in my own work too. And that's the last half an hour, unless I'm in plein air painting and doing a quick draw where I have to turn the painting in 5 minutes or 15 minutes after it's framed. That last half an hour is in the studio or on location is really looking at what I've done, getting away, coming back. Really, for critiquing, I think that's one of the most important things. Get a little distance, because we're in love with our work or we hate it, one or the other. But until you kind of get away from it and then come back, you really can't see what you've got going. So right. I always recommend, go get a cup of coffee or make a sandwich and come back. Wash your hands first, of course, but
right. Well, at least with pastel, you don't have to worry about drinking the paint water, right?
Right. Oh, somebody asked if I'd mentioned my framer.
Let's see.
Maybe they're local. I use Baxter Quinn in Petaluma.
Yeah, would you kindly mention your framer again?
Yeah, Baxter Quinn in Petaluma.
Okay.
If you were talking, I guess I mentioned, I was talking about plein air frames, and that's Randy Higbee in Costa Mesa. And that's where you can order pre-made frames or have custom frames made. And they're many of them are closed cornered, not high quality gold, but gold, silver, some dark. So that's probably who you were wondering about. And so Randy Higbee.
And Linda Evans made a comment about she loves all the books that you talked about, but also Richard McKinley's, especially his pastel pointer book, Pastel Pointers. So that's another good book, I think, for somebody's library. And we're closed in on our hour, and time flies when you're having fun.
Yes.
And I think Clark, you gave everybody some really good tips, and it was fun to see your process with your pastels, and I'm very honored that you would agree to visit with me today and share your wide wisdom with everybody.
Well, thank you.
Do you have any closing comments that you'd like to make?
Oh boy, just get out and paint. I don't know if any of you see Pierre Guidetti, who does regular videos, and he interviews a lot of artists, and he goes, "Go paint." So that's what I recommend. Yeah, carve out regular time.
Yeah, even a few minutes a day. Even if you can only sacrifice a half an hour, get in the studio or paint. I think it's really important.
That's what I love about pastels. They're always ready for you. You don't have to, if you put your oil palette in the freezer, you don't have to wait for it to defrost. And thank you all.
We got a lot of thanks from everybody.
Names I recognize and some I don't, and I really appreciate everybody for dropping in, and I'm very honored.
And then Clark, we'll with assuming everything works right, we'll have this posted on our website. So people that can't join on the live Zoom, it'll be there for them to watch later. So you know, your interview will be around.
Well,
And so
good.
it's on, it'll be available through the website, the YouTube video.
And now I can go look at some of the other ones. I didn't want to look at them until mine was
Great.
over. I thought it would give me the whims. So thank you very much, Bonnie.
You're very welcome. And it was a pleasure to visit with you. And I hope someday that we can maybe paint together some plein air location somewhere.
I would love that.
All right. You take good care, and everybody, thank you for joining in on the Zoom session. And we'll be working in December. I'm going to be interviewing Craig Lemley from Dakota Art, Pastel company. So it'll be interesting to see his you know, what all he has to say. He's been in the business for a long time and is very knowledgeable. So I'll be excited to visit with Craig as well. And as always, if anybody has somebody that they would like me to interview on the We Talk Art, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me through my website, which is bonniegriffith.com, or on Instagram, you know, whatever. There's lots of ways you can find me. So with that said, I'll say goodbye and thank Clark again for his time, and it was great. Thank you so much, Clark.
Enjoy the rest of your day.